His shirt was gone, but one button sat on the windowsill like it hadn't agreed to what we did. "You walked in like it was yours," he said. "Not borrowed." I didn't apologize. I tucked my hair behind my ear and said, "It was." The rain hadn't stopped outside, but the steam inside the room made the glass weep first. I wasn't undone. I was revealed. There are photos from that evening. I've seen the album. I'm not in any of them, which makes sense. I've always existed just beyond the lens, holding coats, passing napkins, adjusting someone's necklace so it catches light better. The kind of presence people thank without making eye contact. That night was Martin's gallery event, his idea of celebration, full of white wine and canvas conversation. I wore the same navy dress I always reach for when I need to look appropriate without having to think. He didn't ask me to come, but he never does. I just appear where I've always belonged. Next to him, slightly behind, with practiced grace and patient shoes. The room was warm with artificial lighting and polite admiration. Abstracts to the left, still lives to the right. I always prefer the still ones. They don't ask to be understood, only to be arranged. I noticed the frame before I noticed him. It was the fourth piece on the right wall, nothing grand. A bowl of persimmons, a folded cloth, a window hinted in light. But the frame leaned, just slightly, a few degrees off-center, like it had shifted on its own, or wanted to. I stepped toward it instinctively, the way you might reach for a cup about to tip, or a child too close to the edge. And then his voice behind me. "Do you think it wants to fall left?" he said. "Or is it waiting for someone to set it straight?" It was a quiet voice. Not whispering. Just low, deliberate. Like it didn't need to be louder to be heard. I turned. He was younger than me, by more years than I'd ever say out loud, but not boyish. Not polished either. He wore no name tag, just a rolled-sleeve shirt and an expression that didn't apologize for being curious. He looked at the frame, not at me, but I felt seen all the same. "Maybe," I said, "more to the painting than to him. It's tired of pretending it fits." He smiled at that. A small, unforced smile that didn't land on his lips so much as settle in his eyes. He moved beside me. Close but not inappropriate. Just enough that I could tell he smelled faintly of cedarwood and something metallic, like ink or old tools. His shoulder hovered near mine. He didn't touch me. Not really. But his hand lifted toward the frame, slow, careful. Our fingers didn't meet, but I felt the air change where they might have. He adjusted the painting with precise fingers. Not fussing, just coaxing it gently into place. And when he was done, he didn't step away. He looked at it, head tilted, and then said softly, "Better." Though I think it liked being off. I don't remember answering. I don't remember what Martin was doing then. Maybe introducing someone. Maybe not noticing I'd gone still. We didn't speak again. Not that night. Not until much later. But I left earlier than I usually would. Slipped out without saying goodbye, without finding Martin's hand. My scarf wasn't warm enough, but something inside me had already begun to burn. I walked home slower than usual. Took the long way through side streets I hadn't used in years. Let the night air bite my cheeks until they stung. Not from cold, but from something I didn't yet have a name for. I don't remember most of the paintings that night. But I remember exactly where his fingers paused midair near mine, and how a crooked frame suddenly felt like the most honest thing in the room. The message came on a Tuesday. No name, no greeting. Just 8 words. I rehung the painting. Still leans. "You were right." I read it once, then again. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because part of me didn't know where to place the reply. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't a question. But somehow it rearranged the air around me. That evening, I reached for the wine glass without looking. Poured too much. Let it swirl longer than needed, just to watch the color settle. Martin didn't notice. He was reading. Or pretending to. We'd grown good at parallel silences. Wednesday at 4:03, I found myself standing in the hallway, facing the mirror I hadn't truly looked into in months. The light from the west window fell just so soft gold, like it had been waiting for a reason to touch my cheek again. I tilted my head slightly, imagined a different version of me walking into frame. She stood taller, wore something with buttons down the back. Her hands moved with intention, not habit. I watched her disappear the moment I blinked. That afternoon I opened a drawer I rarely touched. Inside, tucked beneath old scarves and a receipt from a forgotten cafe, was a tube of lipstick I didn't remember keeping. A shade too bold for the version of me Martin knew. I turned it in my hand, uncapped it, held it to my lips but didn't use it. Just felt the weight of the possibility. Then closed it again. By Thursday I'd stopped checking my phone for his name. Instead I started noticing when the air changed. When a door creaked. When the kettle's whistle lingered just half a second longer than usual, as if waiting for something that wouldn't come. Martin asked during dinner, "Is something wrong?" I smiled. A calm one. Too calm. "I think I'm just tuning back in." He didn't ask what that meant. He cut his steak. Reached for the salt. Our rhythms never skipped. They just muted. That night, I walked into the living room and paused in front of the still life above the mantel. It had always hung straight. Impeccable. Framed like a conclusion. But something in me ached for imbalance. I raised a hand. Not to touch, just to see how close I could get without wanting more. My fingers hovered, then stilled in midair. The air felt thicker there. As if memory had weight and it knew where to press. The rain came lightly, like someone knocking without urgency. It traced slow rivers down the glass, blurring the garden beyond. Behind that veil of water, the world looked softer, easier to forgive. I thought of the gallery again, of the frame that leaned without shame, of a hand that moved with such care. It never had to ask permission. I hadn't replied to his message, but I reread it that night twice before turning off the lamp. I hadn't done anything wrong, but something inside me had shifted, just enough to misalign everything I thought was fixed. The rain didn't ask. It just came quick diagonal like it knew I'd try to resist. I hadn't planned to stop. But the city turned unfamiliar under the downpour, and my feet, unconsulted, found their way to the street with the blue door and quiet window light. He opened the studio door before I could knock. "You look like you walked through a Monet," he said. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like something had unclenched in my chest. Inside, the room was warmer than I remembered. Turpentine. Orange peel. Rain on hot stone. I didn't shake off the water. I let it cling. He pointed toward a canvas leaning against the far wall. "She's not finished," he said. "I haven't named her yet." It was a woman, back turned, shoulder bare, hair loose like it had fallen mid-thought. There was a window slightly open and outside. Nothing. Just a gray suggestion of elsewhere. The light in the painting wasn't warm. It was honest. I stepped closer, felt the distance between me and the brushstrokes narrow into something personal. "She's not waiting," I said. "But someone should ask why she hasn't left." He stood behind me, not touching, just close, like whether you can feel but not name. He reached for my shoulder, lifted the hood gently, adjusted it back, smoothing the edge near my collar. That small mundane gesture made the room tip slightly, like gravity had shifted its allegiance. I turned to face him, slowly, intentionally. I didn't mean to close the space, but I didn't stop myself either. There was no sharp inhale, no thunderclap, only the quiet softening of two people who had already made 1,000 decisions before this one. His breath reached me first, then the faint scent of paint and cedar and something that might have been soap or regret. His mouth brushed my cheek, tentative, light as a question left unfinished. Then a beat later my mouth. We didn't move. We just stayed. Not tangled. Not lost. Just present. It wasn't hunger. It was a remembering. I placed my hand on his chest, then gently guided his palm to the center of mine. Over the coat, over the wool, over years of not being asked what I felt beneath it. "Can you hear that?" I asked without raising my voice. "It's not my heart. It's me. Taking back the rhythm they told me to forget." He didn't reply, but his hand didn't fall away either. I held it there, just long enough, then stepped back, not as refusal but as decision. We both stood still. The moment didn't break. It dissolved slow and deliberate, like smoke returning to air. He watched me reach for the door. "It's still raining," he said. "I know." Outside, the sky remained open. The street shone with silver and shadow. My coat grew heavier with each step. And yet, for the first time in years, I was soaked to the bone. and not cold at all. Since that day, no one called ahead, and no one followed after. What lingered was a space still wet with pause, tucked somewhere between my breastbone and an unsaid sentence. Martin had just adjusted the painting in our living room. I heard the soft thud of the rubber mallet, more like a sigh than a sound. He stepped back, tilted his head and said, "It's off-center." I didn't look up. "Let it be," I murmured. "If something crooked feels right, perhaps that's just its own kind of balance." I started noticing things I used to walk past without thought. The second hand ticking past 4 o'clock. The scent of paint clinging to the cuff of a jacket I hadn't washed. The rain no longer made me melancholic. It nodded quietly like a secret shared. I didn't reply to Elias's message. Didn't delete it. Didn't reread it. I simply let it stay like a half-played chord. His last words were, "You don't have to return, but I've left a space for you, where the light hasn't dried the color." I'd folded the phone shut before reading the full sentence, but somehow I still remembered every word, as if they had been whispered directly into the inside of my ear. I didn't enter the studio, but I passed by. Not intentionally. Not in avoidance. Just my feet found that route on their own whenever I needed coffee or air or something unnamed. One late afternoon, I opened the old wardrobe. There, on a dusted wooden hanger, was the red silk scarf Martin had given me on our wedding day. I'd never worn it, not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it stood out too brightly in the kind of life I'd built. That day I hung it. Didn't wrap it. Didn't try it on. Just placed it inside the wardrobe door, where it would meet my eyes each time I opened it. No one spoke of what had happened, but I began to hear the shift in my own voice. It had dipped. Not sad, just changed. Like someone inside me was relearning the act of speaking from scratch. I didn't know if the studio lights were still on, but each time I passed I turned my head, not because I hoped, but because something more frightening had crept in. I wasn't ready to stop looking. The night Martin mentioned a conference in San Diego, I asked him about it twice, though his answer didn't change. I didn't care for the content. I just wanted to keep him a few seconds longer in that living room with the now straightened frame. Straightened? For whose eyes? That evening I sat in the dark and didn't turn on the lights. The rain wasn't heavy, but it blurred every outline beyond the window. I rested my forehead against the glass, not sure if from weariness or from needing to feel something cold. And in that stillness I realized, for the first time I was standing between two rooms belonging to neither. I used to think silence was a form of grace, that by not saying the thing I was somehow protecting it or perhaps protecting myself from the ache of truth. But now I'm not sure if silence is grace, or just fear dressed in good manners. That evening Martin was peeling apples in the kitchen. The sound of the knife tracing the fruit skin filled the room like slow rain on an old roof. I watched him for a moment, then asked, "If there's a part of me that never really lived in this house, would you want to know it?" He didn't look up right away. He just kept peeling, the skin falling into the sink in delicate spirals. Then quietly, "If you tell me, I'll listen. But don't make me guess." I nodded. Or maybe I didn't. It felt like a nod, the kind that happens deep in the chest, not the neck. I walked to the living room, where he'd straightened the picture frame a few nights ago. It was hanging perfectly now, mathematically centered. I placed my hand on the frame. Not to move it, just to feel something that still held shape. And then, without warning, memory returned. Our wedding day. Postponed because the car taking us to the ceremony skidded in the rain. Everyone scattered. I stayed, in a dress that hadn't wrinkled yet, hair still neat, waiting in a chapel that smelled of cold stone and lilies. Waiting and waiting. It was the first time I rehearsed the art of putting my own needs on hold, and I got good at it. The next morning a package arrived. No name on the return address. Inside was a painting, smaller than the last. A woman again, but this time she had turned slightly. Her face wasn't fully visible, but her eyes were unmistakably searching. Not pleading, not demanding, just witnessing. Like she'd always been there, waiting for me to turn around too. On the back, a single note in soft blue ink. "I don't know what to call you yet, but I'm learning through the negative space." I read it twice, not to understand it better, but to let the words settle into me like dusk settles into a window pane. I placed the painting on my bedside table. Didn't hang it. Didn't frame it. Just let it lean there, quiet and unapologetic, like a question that has waited long enough. Later that night I sat on the edge of our bed. The lights off. The moon grazing the curtain like it was too shy to enter fully. I wasn't crying. I wasn't restless. I just didn't want to move. Because somehow stillness had begun to feel like a form of showing up. The red scarf in the closet, the one Martin gave me on our wedding day, the one I never wore, caught the moonlight for a second when I opened the door. It looked different this time. Not like a gift. Not like an apology. But like a signal. Not to go. Not to stay. Just to be seen. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. I'm afraid I never let myself arrive. The studio smelled different that morning. Not of paint or wood, or the warm trace of someone just gone, but of nothing. That kind of silence that only arrives when something has left and isn't coming back. The lights were off. A single beam of sun slipped through the high window and struck the edge of the work table, catching on the corner of an envelope. His handwriting, unmistakably quiet. Like someone who had learned the cost of loud declarations. I won't keep you here. But if you ever learn how to hang yourself onto a canvas, don't choose a frame that seals you in. I read it once. Once was enough. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. I folded the letter into my pocket and walked out, letting the echo of the door closing be the reply. Outside, the pavement still shimmered from the morning rain. Puddles mirrored the sky, imperfect, fractured but honest. I passed the spot where the tree leans toward the river like it's listening. This time I stopped. I reached into my coat and pulled out the red scarf. The one Martin gave me on the day we said vows under a sky too bright for our nerves. I'd never worn it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to wear something chosen for me before I'd chosen myself. Now I did. I wrapped it slowly, not like an accessory, but like a sentence I was finally ready to speak. The wind brushed my cheek, almost approving. The river beside me moved without urgency, like it knew every current ends up somewhere. I walked without destination. For the first time, that wasn't a failure, it was freedom. Later I would learn that Martin had known. Not everything. But enough. He once told a friend I overheard. Clara's never hidden anything. She just learned to stay very still in plain sight. And that perhaps was the real tragedy. Not the almost affair. Not the letters. Not even the rain-drenched afternoon that never crossed a physical line but cracked something deeper. No. The tragedy was that I'd lived so long inside an outline drawn by someone else's pencil. A role rehearsed until it became muscle memory, but never mine. That evening, as I stood at the foot of our bed, the red scarf still warm against my throat, I caught my reflection in the wardrobe glass. Not sharp. Not defined. But there. Whole if slightly blurred. And mine. From the other room I heard Martin's voice, soft, not surprised. I don't know when Clara left me. Maybe because she didn't ask permission to go. He wasn't bitter. Just stating a fact that had been waiting to be said aloud. And I didn't leave. Not really. I just stopped auditioning for a part that everyone recognized except me. I didn't drift away. I didn't fall or slip or get pulled. Let's be clear, I didn't leave. I walked. Steady. Eyes open. Not toward someone else but toward the version of me I kept postponing. There was no applause waiting. No warm arms, no grand reward. But there was space. Finally. And I filled it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but with a kind of breath I hadn't drawn in years. What I found wasn't freedom from guilt. It was freedom from pretending. I didn't choose a man. I chose motion. And I wore that red scarf like a question finally asked. There was a time I whispered my wants into pillows, hoping they'd dissolve before morning. A time I thought silence meant peace, and deferring meant grace. I said sorry before I asked for anything. I practiced being palatable, like a woman raised to be agreeable, not whole. But here's what I wish someone had told me. Wanting something true doesn't make you reckless. Refusing to vanish doesn't make you cruel. So many of us live like ghosts in well-decorated rooms, present but not permitted. We don't need more rebellion. We just need permission from ourselves to speak in full sentences. Sometimes becoming yourself isn't a moment of fire. It's the day you stop saying I'm fine, when your voice trembles for more. If any part of this stayed with you, not loudly but like a small ache that knows your name, then leave a like. Not for me. but for the part of you that wants to be seen without defense. If you've ever paused before knocking, ever dressed like someone else's idea of appropriate, ever waited for permission to be real, then maybe this story is also yours. And if you know someone who carries themselves like a secret, send this to them, not to awaken shame, but to remind them we don't have to apologize just because we exist out loud. I never told anyone about that afternoon in the studio, but I have a feeling someone saw me walk out, soaked in rain but not in guilt. And maybe, just maybe, that's why no one tried to stop me. That day didn't have a soundtrack. Just the soft hum of streetlight on wet pavement, and the echo of my own footsteps. Not leaving, but arriving.